Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this very special day. There's actually two reasons to celebrate today. One is that today we are really launching our Interdisciplinarity Guide. AYA is Amsterdam Young Academy. We are a group of talented young researchers within Amsterdam Academia. So we come from the University of Amsterdam, from the VU Amsterdam, from the medical centers, from ACTA. And we really want to work along three different themes. So one is science and society, one is policy, academic policies, and one is interdisciplinarity. And that's the reason we are here today, because we wrote something. I will just briefly show it here. The AYA Interdisciplinarity Guide. If you're really interested, you can get one in the back of the room at the end. So that's worth a celebration, I think, because what we have been doing in the past years is looking at why are we doing interdisciplinary research, why is it important, what are the hurdles that we encounter, what are the opportunities. And we really found in talking to different people in this sort of space that there's, of course, a lot of differences between people, depending on their research, on their topic, on who they work with. But there's also a lot of common threads. So there's really a shared interdisciplinary space where people run into the same problems and into the same inspirations. And that's something that we really wanted to share, also because it's so difficult to really Google interdisciplinarity and then find useful stuff, particularly when viewed from a local perspective, so within Amsterdam. So we wrote this guide to help people further along. And at the same time, we wanted to launch this guide, not just by talking about the guide itself, because we just hope people will read it, but also using a case. And that's why I think today is also very special, because we will have an event on childhood obesity, which of course is a major problem, not only in Amsterdam, but also beyond. And the good thing is that despite two of our speakers having COVID today, we actually still have a pretty amazing panel of speakers on this topic. So what we would like to do today is, of course, primarily exchange thoughts on childhood obesity and how to target this problem that is truly interdisciplinary, but at the same time also weave in a little bit of these interdisciplinary thoughts, challenges, inspirations that could be of use beyond just this topic. And for today we have three amazing speakers. You can already see them next to me. The first one is Caroline Hertog. I'm sorry. She is part of the management team of the GGD Amsterdam, and she's the leader of a project on improving or decreasing obesity in the youth of Amsterdam. So she's basically the expert on this topic and how to target it within Amsterdam. So she will be giving a first a perspective on this problem. Then our second speaker will be Koosje Dijkstra. She works at the VU Amsterdam as an assistant professor, and her topic is also childhood obesity. She's trained as a nutritionist and epidemiologist, and she will be talking about a community-based approach to childhood obesity. And last but not least, we have Elsje van Bergen, who's an associate professor at VU Amsterdam, who works in biological psychology and knows a lot about genes, and she will be highlighting that perspective on childhood obesity. So I think altogether we have a pretty multidisciplinary perspective on this problem. So I propose that we get started with learning a little bit more about childhood obesity. Karen, can I invite you?
Yes, thank you, Linda, and everyone here for having me. I was only aware this morning of this seminar taking place, so I've come literally unprepared, which is always the best way of being here, isn't it? And I have to say I'm really excited about this guide. I've quickly glanced over it on my way here, and I think it's going to help a lot of people, because as Linda said, and as you state here, I think interdisciplinary is one of the major buzzwords of this era, and that makes it so difficult to grasp and to sort of put your hand on it. For me, working in local policy, local administration already for 15-20 years, wicked problems are, for me personally and for us as a city, are the things that we're sort of aiming to make the difference on, and that's childhood obesity and but health and prevention in general at the moment, but of course also climate change, how to find a new business model for this era we live in. And they're all wicked problems. They're all problems that don't have one single silver bullet. And actually, to turn it around, if you are going to look for the silver bullet, you're only making it worse. Looking at health differences in this country, in this city, we've been working on that from a certain paradigm for nearly 40 years now. And over that period of time, the discrepancies in health in this city, in this country, have only widened. And as Einstein already told us, if we keep on doing the things that we've been doing before, we won't get a different outcome. And still, in my daily work with academia, with people who implement our policies, with parents and children, the only thing I get back is that it's really difficult to change our paradigm, to do things really, truly different. And I believe that the way forward is interdisciplinary work, is having that whole systems perspective, and trying to move away from what literature calls the lifestyle drift, looking at the individual and their individual behavior. Of course, as Elsje will share with us, individuals have different programming which responds different to triggers from inside and outside, but if we don't do anything about that outside, it's so difficult to truly and really structurally change your behavior. So I would like to use this platform to once again stress how important it is to work together on a healthy environment. And that means getting a sugar tax. In this country, we still don't have a sugar tax. Lowering the taxes on fruit, veggies and drinking water. Making sure there's less points in the city and nationally where you can buy alcoholic beverages, where you can buy cigarettes, other things to smoke. So that's the kind of improvements that we'd like to see in the physical environment, in the economic environment, as you could say. And on the other hand, what we would also long for is that healthy becomes the new normal. What we saw in experiments, for example, with Koosje and her group at the university, is that once you start talking about having a healthy primary school, there's about 8 to 10 years ago, it was a bit stressful for the teaching team. Will parents allow us to only have water and healthy snacks? Will that be okay? And the funny thing was, the minute we would say, this is now going to be a healthy school, and the team would say, we want to have healthy kids, we know they'll have better learning possibilities if they eat healthily throughout the day. Healthy is the new normal. Within 4 to 6 weeks, everyone would just hand their kids water and healthy snacks for the school day, and healthy would be normal. And parents would actually come up to us and say, this is so good that healthy is now normal. So that's the other thing that we really aim for, that we sort of lose this environment in which fat and sugar is connected to cozy and fun and party, and healthy will be the new normal as well for our social interactions. And I believe that working interdisciplinary, working with all the different faculties and paradigms that all of you and all of your colleagues bring is the only way forward, because that is what we haven't done in the past. So it's probably going to work. We don't know how yet, but let's try to figure out this hour. And for me, today is a starting point to meet up with you and to see how we can bring your ideas into our daily work, into our academic dialogue, and take it further. And that's a responsibility I feel I have, but I also hope that you will feel that we all have for the next generation of kids in this city, but also in this country and our world, really. Thanks.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for having me and pitch this research, my research. But I also would like to congratulate them with the launch of this interdisciplinarity guideline. I'm really looking forward to reading it, and I think it's a very nice piece. And I already recognize myself in the picture on the first page, so it looks good. Thank you. Well. My name is Koosje Dijkstra. I'm an assistant professor at VU University at the Department of Health Sciences and at the section Youth and Lifestyle. Why we need interdisciplinarity in studying childhood overweight and obesity? Well, I think this picture gives the answer. I think Karin knows it already, but this is the Foresight obesity map. And it was created in 2007, and this was the first qualitative map that showed all the factors that are related to childhood obesity, that are directly related or indirectly related. In the middle you see energy balance, or obesity, that's how obesity arises. And you see more than 100 factors. They're all related to obesity. And Karen already mentioned that childhood of obesity is a wicked problem. We have multiple drivers, they are diverse and dynamic. Personal factors that Elsje is going to talk about, but also characteristics of the environment, the social cultural environment, the political environment, all different kind of factors. But they are not only just factors, they are also interrelated. They are interacting. And I think that's why we need an interdisciplinary research group. For example, here Tessa is sitting. She's a PhD student of mine, and she has a background in public administration and in biomedical science. And next to her you see Carlina. She's an anthropologist. She is also a PhD student of mine. But me, I'm also trained as a dietitian and as a nutritionist and an epidemiologist. But we also are working with medical doctors, physiologists, health scientists, because all these factors here have their own properties and characteristics. And when we only studying them as a health scientist or a nutritionist, we will never solve this issue. And we can work with a wide group of people on one topic, all studying our own discipline. But we need to go to this shared understanding. Karin also mentioned it, because only then we are acknowledging the interaction between all these factors. But we don't need only an interdisciplinary research team, we also need an interdisciplinary stakeholder group, because we know that interventions that are developed with stakeholders in their neighborhood are way more effective. And that also means that we need stakeholders from, well, I'm not sure, we cannot target them all, but the most important factors in this map. That's really nice, and it's all theory, and but how do you do that in practice? I give you two examples. This is our Foresight map of Amsterdam East. Karin was involved in the creation of this causal loop diagram, and this is from LIKE. LIKE is a participatory system approach study in Amsterdam East, where we try to promote healthy behaviors of adolescents transitioning from primary to secondary school. And together with 12 different researchers, ranging from also people from the GGD, but nutritionists and all kind of disciplines, we created this map. But we also did that with 40 stakeholders in the neighborhoods. But we also did it with parents and with children. And trying to make a shared understanding of all the factors that are important, of the underlying mechanisms, but also towards the problem. And based on this map, we made a broad supported action plan, and we involved the stakeholders, but also all the different researchers in creating the actions, implementing the actions, and evaluating the actions. And then people ask me often, okay, but how do you know who to invite and which stakeholders do you need in the neighborhood? And that we investigated in the Food for Smiles project. That is also a study with a participatory system approach in Amsterdam New West in order to promote a healthy start for every child in the first 1,000 days of his or her life. And we asked ourselves, we were working alike, and then we were thinking, oh, who do we have to invite? And sometimes it went good, and sometimes a little bit less good. But in Food for Smiles, we thought we were going to do a network analysis. So via a questionnaire, we sent to all the stakeholders in the neighborhood and measured the quality of the network around the first 1,000 days. We asked them questions: with who do you work? What is this relationship? How much energy does it give you? How often do you meet? Who do you want to meet? With who are you working but currently not yet? And that's, we calculated and made this map. You can see, okay, there's the gatekeeper that is between networks. We invite him, and that is a potential network. If we give him a little bit more experiences and knowledge, he can be a very important gatekeeper. And we invited a group of 30, 40 stakeholders, and we also made our own foresight obesity map for the first 1,000 days in Amsterdam New West. Also a broad supported action plan we are currently working on, and we are going towards the implementations of actions. And this morning I give a 2-hour lecture about especially this topic that I'm now trying to summarize in only 5 minutes. But there's one thing that I want to point out, and that is what this interdisciplinary way of working means for me as a scientist. Because I'm a nutritionist, I'm a dietitian, but I'm now working with a more holistic approach. I'm working with people from housing committees, and I'm solving factors related to poverty. In Amsterdam New West, we are trying to make formal and informal partners more able to work together. That has nothing to do with nutrition. And we use innovative methods sometimes and see, oh, do they apply to public health or obesity? Sometimes not, but sometimes we do. For example, group model building and making these causal loop diagrams. We never did it before, but it worked in Amsterdam. But you have to be very flexible because you don't know what the intervention will look like. You're going to work with the group of researchers and a group of stakeholders, and they, along the way, develop the action program. So if you want to evaluate some kind of action program, what is your outcome? So you have to be very flexible and not too nervous, because you just have to go and see where it ends. But at all, it means that I enjoy my work much more, I learn much more, and I'm more satisfied with the impact we are making. Thank you. Or how we envisioned it. To make it very interactive, after each speaker, Karen will ask a brief question, and at the end we will have, of course, questions for the entire audience as well. Karen.
Well, Koosje, as you already suggested, we work together a lot.
Yeah.
And you've now shared with us what it takes for you to do differently. But do you also see us as a government, as a local government, act differently in the connection with you, and while we work together in these kind of programs? Or can we just continue business as usual?
No. I think we are working already 4 or 5 years in the LIKE project that I presented. And I think the first year was very on, okay, getting to know each other. Or we already had a background of 5 years, but you never know each other good enough. And I think we switched from thinking in determinants and factors into underlying mechanisms. And that took a while to make that clear to everybody. And we also had to find out how this system approach, participatory system approach worked. But I think that was one of the lessons, but also to be a little bit more holistic, innovative and flexible, also for the local and national government. What did you experience? Because, yeah, you see it from the inside.
No, I agree, and I think it's important here to stress that it takes everyone to change, to tango.
Yeah.
It can't be us as government saying to academia, well, work more interdisciplinary. We also need that mirror to look critically at what we're doing, but also get the feedback from you, because there are parts of our team that, well, that don't grasp it immediately, and things like that shouldn't be left unspoken of.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And that,
perhaps we could add being honest or open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Given feedback, because the feedback loops in the system are critical,
Yeah.
but there are as well if we work in projects like this.
yeah. Well, and you teach us in the course bestuurlijke sensitiviteit, the ins and the outs.
Political sensitivity.
Political sensitivity, yeah, and that was an eye-opener. Yeah, for both groups, I think. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Enough to talk about in the panel discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Elsje van Bergen. But in the panel discussion and the drinks, we would also very much like to get to know you, because that's the good thing of having a small audience, that we can get to know each other. So I'm by background, I studied human movement sciences and have a PhD in educational sciences, and now in behavioral genetics. I usually study childhood cognitive development in children, but one of my PhD students now studies BMI. So I also got to learn from him about BMI. And this is, and I work at the Netherlands Twin Register, and we collect data in Dutch twins and their parents and their children and their partners. So this is the data that we have. So each little gray dot is one data point. This is the data that we have on childhood BMI in the Netherlands Twin Register. Well, first you see this solid line. That's like the general trend. So you see that children are born very light relative to later on. Then they get this round head as they in their baby time, and then at 1 it's the roundest. As you can see there, it peaks, and then children acquire locomotion. They start walking, crawling, so lose also burn some calories. So then they get slimmer, and then when they're like 6, they're leanest, and then it goes up again. So that's a general trend. But you also see all the dots. There's a wide variation, so lots of individual differences. And in my department, in behavioral genetics, we study individual differences from a gene-environment perspective. So the interplay between genetic factors, innate factors, and environmental factors. So why do some children are in the top range here in BMI, and some at the bottom, and most in the middle? And if you think about any childhood outcome, like whether it's BMI or whether it's their cognitive development, people often look at the parents. So when things do not go well in childhood, it's often the parents that get blamed. But if you see a correlation, an association between something that happens in the home environment, or parenting skills, or parental aspects, whatever you look at the parents and children's outcomes, that correlation is often also by academics interpreted as cause and effect. But this is lesson 1 in psychology, and I think in many disciplines. So here you see a correlation between how many ice creams are sold on a particular day and how many children or adults, whatever, suffer from sunburn. But then that correlation, you cannot interpret that as the ice creams causing sunburn. But so this is like kind of a fun example that you immediately see there's a third factor that explains that correlation, and we cannot talk about cause and effect, though this is happening all the time, even in prestigious academic journals. So here, when we think about what happens in the home environment, aspects, factors of parenting, like their educational level, parental BMI, their parenting style, how many books there are, what they eat, whatever happens in the home environment, and children's outcome, for example, BMI, you see those correlations which are often interpreted as cause and effect. And it's very difficult to disentangle cause and effect in the home environment, because parents do not only provide their kids with the home environment, but also with their genetic material. So when we go back to individual differences in BMI, And if you do studies, for example, in twins, looking at individual differences, whether they are caused by environmental differences between children or genetic differences between children, you see that most of that variability in BMI in children is due to genetic differences between children. So just blaming parents for childhood obesity, that is just, we shouldn't do that, because, and also like obesity in adulthood, it's not your fault. So for some people it's just naturally way easier to restrict their food intake. And for some people, it's just way easier to enjoy exercising. So Karen is my friend from pole dancing, so she knows that I enjoy exercising. But my mother does not, and she's twice my weight. Yeah, so we cannot ignore genetics here. And the cool thing, so when we look in Koosje's graph about all the factors that influence something like BMI, the cool thing about the genetics, studying genetics, is that you cannot change your genes. So all those factors, they are like in a spider web with all the arrows pointing in all directions. But the cool thing from a scientific perspective about genes is that they're only pointing in one direction. And therefore it's a really cool research tool. So for example, in this study from London, where they also study twins, they do take genetics into account, and they see that actually parents in their parenting style, so whether they restrict children's food intake or like encourage them to eat more, that their parenting behavior is influenced by the children's genes. So they respond to what the child needs. So this is my takeaway. A correlation between children's homes and children's BMI cannot be taken as cause and effect, and genetics can help to elucidate a true environmental effect. So when we take genetics into account, by doing so we can uncover true environmental effects that are unconfounded by genetics.
I'm really interested on your thoughts on how could we use this tomorrow in our policy making?
So when you look at individual differences, when we see that it's the largest influence is genetic influence, that doesn't mean that policy influences that you talked about, like a sugar tax or having healthier schools where children only have no soda drinks. So if you change the environment for the better, then all children will become healthier and get a healthier weight. So, but still then individual differences in children's BMI will be largely heritable, but it does not mean at all that you cannot change the environment. So we should still strive for an environment that is healthy. And so for example, if you think about children's self-control, which is also heritable, so they know maybe that they shouldn't buy soda drinks or go to the McDonald's in the school break. But so some children will find it naturally more difficult to resist those temptations. But if you have the environment in such a way that there is no McDonald's at all near the school, or that in the school canteen you cannot buy soda drinks, then that will also help them to get to a healthy weight. But when we think about studying environmental effects in the home environment, like the parenting, if you study that, then you should also take into account that parents and children do not only share that home environment, but also the genes.
Very clear, thank you.
Thanks, Elsje. Maybe you can also take a seat now, because we now turn to sort of our panel discussion, and I think there's already a lot of things to follow up on. The first question I would like to ask you, Karen, is what you think, what the biggest learning point is that you've gathered over the past years in working across disciplines, and maybe not just with academic partners, but in general.
I won't lean back. Our biggest learning point. Could I have two?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yes.
Well, one is what Koosje already touched upon, is that you need to be able to take the time to invest in the relationship. You can't have the kind of difficult interdisciplinary discussions, trying to learn each other's paradigms, trying to learn how to interpret each other's evidence bases, if you don't sort of get the other person. So you really need to invest in the relationship, have loads of cups of coffee, a drink once in a while, alcohol free or not, and sort of really invest in understanding each other, because as with good friendships or relationships, getting to really know each other and really building, that takes time and trust and sort of leniency to sort of ask questions and dive into each other's worlds deeper. So that's one. And the other one for me is to, what I often see if we're talking about changing behavior, implementing health policies, is that we're very focused on the end user, whereas there's usually nearly always a sort of interdisciplinary person, someone who actually gives the training to a group of parents, someone who's in the classroom helping the kids, someone who's delivering the movement and dietary plans. So that sort of, there's always an intermediate person. And what I see is many studies focus so much on the end user that they sort of forget that by changing the behavior of the end user, the interdisciplinary person needs to change its behavior as well. And if we don't look into that person and their behaviors as well, we sort of automatically assume that if we change the program, they will change as well. But they're human beings, just as the end user. So for me, there's always two personas, two types of personas to look into, the end user, but also that sort of service delivery person. And if you don't get them and have respect for all their troubles and worries, it will be very difficult to get the end results delivered, whether it's a policymaker, a physiotherapist, or a dietitian, or a ambassador mum, or any way. Yeah.
Good point. Do you think that that person that you mentioned, this sort of hub in between sort of the insights and then the end user, should also be part of the study itself whenever you do research?
Well, if possible, yes. Like Koosje shared, I believe that it's that with the participatory action research and the group model build, we having all the voices around the table is so enriching that it would be a shame not to do it. Perhaps not in every step of the way, not in every phase of your research, but you shouldn't have a sort of a community group that you only talk to 3 times during your research, because then you won't get to know them. The beautiful research being done in London, and we tried to copy it, was us following a group of mums in the southeastern part of the city in their daily routines, where they would buy their food, to really understand the impact of the food environment and their heritage, their cultural norms, their own ways of working on the food choices they made for their kids. Well, that was so much, walking along with them for a month was so much more rewarding than sort of having 3 panel discussions, because they needed to trust us and we needed to grasp what they were doing. And afterwards I thought a lot about my own food choices. Well, there's about 200 food choices apparently that we make every day, I just asked for water and tea instead of a soda. That was one. But it really makes you realize how many choices there are, and that's only food. Then you've got your movement, you've got your sleep. So it's really, you can't get to know your research subjects and participants good enough.
And I think in addition to your... Yeah. In addition to what you said, it's when working with this, well, the people who deliver the intervention, we see also in Like, but also in Food for Smiles, it's so important to create this ownership about the intervention and about the program, and because they have to change their daily behaviors. We don't. We think, well, we develop the intervention and then we think they're going to change their behavior and, well, then the problem is solved. But you have to create ownership about the problem. And that's why you have to engage them in the research. Not in every step, but in the most crucial parts. I agree.
And to you, when working with this sort of approach, what is the single most important thing in recent memory for you, at least, that has opened your eyes to the way to go forward in this space? Can you name an example?
Yeah, well, there's
really
never a silver bullet. Also,
oh yes,
this research,
forgot it
so
already.
that really helps. People are always asking me what is the most important factor, and after
I try to make it recent, something.
Well, I think in working with all the stakeholders and Like, and in Food for Smiles, you need time. But it's the same as Karin mentioned, you need money, you need enough budget, because otherwise you're going to engage people, you give them the promise that you're going to do something with their knowledge, and then there isn't enough money or they have to do it themselves. So you have to make sure that there is enough budget to develop actions and to come up with interventions. And for us it's work, but for them it's their real life experience. So you have to prepare it very well. We always try to do it at a very nice and fancy location with good food and drinks and also some network interaction, so that they think, okay, this is a nice experience. It's not like, well, I, in my PhD also did some focus groups, and that was in a small room in the VU, and it never worked that good. But so trying to keep it very professional for them, because it's their work and their life.
Yeah.
So that were the three most important ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, time, money, and food.
Yes. Yeah, I can imagine that. Then if I ask you for the single thing that is most often going wrong, that is sort of leading to persistence of the problem, would it be lack of those three things?
Well, I think the most difficult part we are encountering at the moment is that both the Like study and both Food for Smiles are trying to come up with systemic actions, very high in the system. And then we are mapping the whole system with all the stakeholders. And then we have to change the housing situation of pregnant women in Amsterdam New West. Well, that is very important. That is very difficult. Very important, but very difficult. So together with all the system researchers at the VU, we're now trying to map all the actions that are coming from system thinking, and to see, okay, what can we do with this approach, and what is realistic? Can we change the world, or maybe, and what is good enough then? So that's my daily struggle. So, okay, how realistic is mapping the system and coming up with systemic actions? But we also have like a food environment action group with the GGD, and we are trying to lobby for the sugar tax and all those environmental issues. So sometimes it happens, you never know when it happens, but sometimes you have a breakthrough, and then, but that's my struggle for now.
Can I add to that?
For sure, yeah.
Because I completely concur with what Coach is saying. And on the other hand, we only started lobbying for food environment measures in 2016, and it's now 2022. And everything we've been lobbying for is in the new national coalition program. That doesn't mean it's going to be there tomorrow in the way we want it, but it's, I mean, talking about system change, sometimes the tipping point is nearer, and global pandemics and or kind of other wicked problems sometimes very strangely help in your quest.
How has the pandemic helped with this?
Well, the urgency for prevention and for a good health has spread so much wider. There's so many more people who suddenly see how important health is and how what you lose if your health is worse than it was before, and also how much of that is lifestyle related, and how important it is to sort of work on that good preventative lifestyle and a strong immune system.
Mm-hmm. And how do you view that sort of beneficial, I guess, movement across the world, and at the same time the increasing inequality between people? Do they kind of clash in the problem of childhood obesity, or do you see a movement on both? Positive movement in both of these?
Well, my glass is always half full, so I try to see the improvement on two things. And what I've recently dived into the thinking of Taleb, who has the barbell model, and who says, and that's something that I would like to add in this line of thinking, who says that we, as humans, we tend to not think about black swans. We tend to think about the things that we can sort of think about and think that we can we know how to I can't find the right word, how we should relate to them. And the real black swans, like having a worldwide 2-year-long pandemic, there were lots of people who sort of knew that was going to come one day, but society as a whole couldn't grasp that notion. And what Taleb says is to sort of open up more to the possibilities of black swans. Of course, they have major side effects which are really negative, but there's a lot of unforeseen things going to happen, and always also look at the positive extra catch that could be connected to that. So for me, the biggest struggle is that muddling through isn't comfortable. Lots of people, lots of policymakers, lots of researchers don't like being in the middle, sort of knowing they're sort of doing the right thing, but not having something catchy or something showy to write an article about, or have a policy paper on, or sort of having something to open, or so sort of being content with muddling, with being in the middle, and
being okay with being uncomfortable is a quote
Absolutely.
that is in the guide that came up
very good
multiple
guide
times.
this.
Yes.
Be uncomfortable, be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
I had a follow-up question to you, Elsje, also about your explanation of how, of course, genetics don't change, so you have a unidirectional impact. Does it basically mean that if you have a more context-based intervention, like not offering any sweets at the school, that you kind of level the playing field in a way so that people are less, the people who are naturally inclined to eat more are less able to do so? Is that a kind of a metaphor? Do you think that that misses some essential aspects still?
How do you mean whether it misses an essential aspect?
Well, in a way, you're leveling the playing field by giving everyone the same, or not giving no one sweets, but at the same time, as soon as someone with genetics that are unfavorable for BMI see some sweets outside of that, maybe they will still have, like, how much can you level the playing field? Is it maybe more sort of my question?
Yeah, I think that's an empirical question. But in general, what you see is that once you level the playing field, so give everybody an equal environment, then traits become even more heritable. Because if you take away all the environmental differences, then it's even more your innate factors that determine individual differences.
So what does that mean practically for?
That means practically that heritability does not have any practical implication.
Well, but maybe I was thinking for the setting of Amsterdam, if you give all the children a healthy environment where there is no unhealthy choice, you would still see that some children doesn't or don't lose weight, and those children can have extra help in healthcare, like with we have like the real obesity care. That's like a real health problem, and we can coach them individually to learn how to come up with the barriers they encounter.
Yeah, no, I agree that those, like if I always think in a normal distribution. Yes. And so if you target those at risk, so kind of give them the most optimal environment to bring them a bit closer to the mean, then that is, so you can indeed have two things if you think about my normal distribution. So either target those at risk and try to optimize their environment to bring them closer to the mean, or come up with interventions for the whole society, and then you change, like you move the whole distribution to the good side.
Do we have any idea on how many of these kids, because it's 1 in 5 kids in Amsterdam is overweight, right? How many of them would be most benefited by a purely individualized intervention because of their genetics?
There's about, top of my head here, about 3,000 to 3,000 kids who are morbid obese. So they would really benefit from a very individual solution coupled with a healthy environment. Yeah. Because making, as you very very vigorously put, having that healthier choice makes it so much easier to stick to your diet or to find a good reason to enjoy your sports anyhow. Yeah. So both are necessary.
Of course, yeah. Is there a final thing you want to bring to discussion before we move to questions from the audience?
I'm really curious, what is the main, because obviously you realized it's not natural for everyone to work this way. So I would like to hear from the audience what barriers they encounter in working more in this way, and if we would have advices or sort of, if we could share something around that.
Let's go ask them. Can I take your, I will move into the, what do you want to do?
Go ahead.
Who has a question or an experience to share on interdisciplinarity? Okay. I will move here. Was you first? You go first.
Hi, so thank you. This is really really interesting what I've heard, and I was wondering about a clarification, if I understood correctly. But so Elsie, you've been saying that there is these genetic differences, and of course comparatively, if the environment is the same, the only difference is genetic. But if I understood correctly, there's also a difference in how easy it is to resist, right? So wouldn't those kids actually benefit even more from a healthy environment? So comparatively, the healthy environment would basically help them more to fix their obesity. So that doesn't mean that that this genetic problem becomes bigger. That would become bigger for maybe people who are more inclined to put on weight if they eat, but for those who have this for whom it's more difficult to control an impulse, or who might be more encouraged to move if they're not inclined to do so, these measurements would help even more. Or do I understand that correctly, or am I now simplifying everything?
No, I think that's great thinking. So the heritability of BMI is extremely high. So when you think about if somebody gets cancer, then we think, oh, that's bad luck, or they have, or that's like they were genetically at risk. But actually, BMI is way more heritable than cancers. So I think it's good to realize that we should not blame people who are obese, that it's their own fault. And then they say in Dutch, elk pondje gaat door het mondje. I completely hate this. So it's like every pound goes to your mouth. So, but there are multiple reasons why BMI is so heritable, and one of them is indeed self-control. So for children and adults for wood, more difficult to resist temptations. But also like the way your metabolic system works, so how quickly you, I don't know, digest, yeah, thank you, digest food, or how much you enjoy doing sports, and whether you get this rush from doing sports. That's all the individual differences that all together, all those little influences, make that BMI so heritable. And I think indeed, I think you have a very good hypothesis there, that if you would change the environment so that even people who are easily tempted to do things that are that increase your BMI, if you take away those like impulses in the environment, that especially for those kids it would be beneficial. Thank you.
So it also means that there's still no silver bullet, even when just looking at genetics. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And I totally agree. It makes it easier for those children living in a healthy environment, but we also know that we investigated the food environment in Amsterdam, and we see that, well, everything that is available in supermarkets and food outlets, but also the promotions on Instagram, but also in the shops, around 80% is unhealthy and 20% is healthy. So how realistic is it at the moment to create a healthy food or a healthy environment for children? Maybe we should first go to 50-50 and then see what happens, and to see how all the children respond to that.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations and discussion. It's really interesting. And also regarding the interdisciplinarity guide, it's really good that it's there, and I really like the part about the interdisciplinary attitude, asking questions instead of thinking to have the answer. I think part of the asking questions bit that makes it awkward is because we tend to have certain ideas of each other, certain stigmas sometimes as well. And something that I'm wondering about regarding childhood obesity is this stigma that you tend to lay upon children if you say your child is obese. Also, regarding the lifestyle, I remember being a kid, and because I was swimming a lot, I had a really, good looking, a average body, I would say, compared to other kids. And I didn't want to eat healthy at the same time because I thought my parents cannot control me. I'm going to eat roze koeken every single day. So there's also this bit of a stigma that you put on things that makes children think that they need to resist something to an extent. And I'm kind of wondering to which extent you see that reflected in your research. Do you see anything about stigmas and lifestyle choices as bad, as criminal almost? Just wondering about that.
Yeah, I think you also see it a lot. It's one example. We made this system dynamic map with children, trying to understand the wider system around obesity and overweight in Amsterdam East, and they were so enthusiastic. And then we came up with this broad supported action plan from the perspectives of the children, and they had great ideas. Okay, we should make a healthy food environment and no candies more at school. And then we came at the part of the actions. And then they said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. No, my friends around me don't want me to be the one who removed all the candy at the school. So, yeah, there is this, it's the opposite, because I think you talk more about stigma, but there's also like this social norm about, okay, I deserve it to eat unhealthy. And it's a very, we also did research on how many times adolescents go to the supermarket on primary and secondary schools. It's like every day, and they spend on average €2.20, and the most bought products are frikandelbroodje, energy drinks and crisps. It's their social activity to buy unhealthy things. That is where things are going about on school. So we should not remove everything, because it's also part of growing up and making their own decision. They get more pocket money and everything, and they have to learn to make healthy choices. But this social norm and stigma, okay, well, we want to eat unhealthy and you don't, it's very sad for the children who like it a lot and who are a little bit more overweight and obese. That's even when you work with children already a topic.
At the same time, if you talk to parents, if you talk to kids one-on-one, they don't always realize that sort of their parents and grandparents having diabetes type 2, perhaps losing limbs, dying earlier, is so connected to their behavior now. And at an individual level, they can be reached in this message. But that's why we believe it's so important to make healthy normal. As Jaap, one of the colleagues of Koosje always says, our society is so obesogenic at the moment that we don't even realize how much sugar and fat we're actually eating. So yes, of course, people and teens especially, they just want to do whatever they want. But as I like to do when I was younger, but my environment was just less unhealthy than it is today. So it's looking at the balance, but in the end, no one wants to end up very ill very early in life. So it's sort of finding that balance. And connected to the stigma, it's especially with all the healthcare professionals, the social workers that we work with. This is a big topic that they're touching on, and luckily they're really, really well equipped in having the right kind of conversations and not blaming kids. So that's why I'm also so happy with Elsje's talk. I mean, and what is so difficult about this lifestyle drift that sort of sneaks into literature so often, as you also showed, there's nothing worse than feeling bad about yourself, not knowing how to change it, and everyone else saying it's really bad. And so that's where we could all start. And you as academics could also start sort of looking into different topics.
Great. I see another question, and I do think we have time for that.
I'm going to try to be very short. I have 3 quick questions. The first one, what's the problem exactly? Because I don't know how many obese kids there are in Amsterdam and Oost and so on. And so what's the problem specifically? Then there was the role of epigenetics, because you can, if I'm not mistaken, change genetics, but then prior to birth. So I was wondering what kind of policy is on that score. And then other comment. A while back, I asked my GP how I could lose weight, and I did exactly the opposite of what he told me, and I lost weight. So I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Taubes, but he talks about the relevance that fat is actually not a bad thing to consume if you want to lose weight, and that exercise is very good for a lot of stuff like discipline and things like that, but not specifically to lose weight. To mention swimming, I'm also a swimmer. The more I swim, the more I want to eat, and of course sugar is a bad thing, but 3 quick questions. Thank you.
In Amsterdam, nearly 1 in 2 adults is overweight or obese, and it's 1 in 5 children. So
defined by BMI?
Yeah. The only metric we have for the whole population in this city or in this country is BMI. And in children, it's about 1 in 5 kids, which is roughly between 20 to 25,000 children. There's already morbid obese kids who are not even 2 years old. And that's why we, together at the national level, we're intensifying what we do in the first 1,000 days period. Because as Elsje's evidence shows, you should help parents perhaps already getting healthier before they become pregnant. To sort of, well, I don't know whether that's genetics as well, but there's a lot of stuff going on there. Morbid obese mums becoming heavier during pregnancy tend to have even heavier babies when they get born. So there's a lot of causal...
Gene-environment interplay, I would call it.
Thank you. Gene-environment interplay.
Thanks.
At work there. But also in that period, in the first 1,000 days, there's so much more to learn, and that's only because of interdisciplinary research and working together that we're making headway there now. Yeah, Tessa did a lot there, yeah. And I completely concur with you about movement. Movement is great for everything. It keeps you so healthy, but you don't lose weight. You can't outrun a fork, as we always say.
So about epigenetics, I know this is kind of a buzzword. So whenever people talk about genetics, they want to throw in, oh, but about epigenetics. So epigenetics, like a metaphor, is that it's like switches, like a switch on your DNA. So like your switches on or off. So a gene can be transcribed and have its function, or it's kind of dormant and silent if the switch is off. So but the research on epigenetics is still in its infancy. So what we can see from your epigenetic profile is if you smoke. So smoking has a big effect on your whether your genes are switched on or off. But apart from that, we know that like also the DNA sequence itself, so the DNA you cannot change the sequence of your letters, also that has an influence on the epigenetics, and like stochastic environmental influences. But so far as we know, they're not like, apart from the smoking, we don't really know big effects yet of epigenetics on your traits.
I read about a study that they fed rats, I know about a study that they fed rats prior that were genetically fine, not obese, and then they fed, I think, the father an American type diet, like say the McDonald's diet, and that their progeny did have obesity problems. I don't know if you know of that study. Otherwise, I can find it and send it to you.
Yeah, no, I would be interested. I don't know of that study. Yeah, so indeed, in animals, we have experimental control. So we can do experiments, and with humans, it's obviously not ethical to do experiments. So we have to make use of like natural experiments, which can be twinning, for example. So an identical twin is like a genetic clone of each other, but then they still turn out a little bit different despite the same genes. Or like experiments, for example, when there is a policy change. So we need to come up with, so we also need to be statisticians at the same time to deal with the fact that we cannot do experiments on humans.
By the way, with the rats, the children have the same kind of obesity health problems that you would associate with being overweight. So I know it's not one of them.
Thanks for the excellent questions. I think there's more to discuss, and that's why I'm happy that in addition to having time here, we have an additional period of time for us to discuss afterwards. We have some money to spend on the rest of the evening, and we have some drinks and some food. So actually I would advise all of you to keep your questions that you didn't get to ask, and keep them and stay around for a little bit, because it's 6, so the time for us to be on the stage and to talk to you is over. I would first of all like to thank Karen a lot for this very last minute, but I think excellent addition to the program, as well as Koosje and Elsje, of course, as our Amsterdam Young Academy experts on this topic of childhood obesity. And I would also like to thank the entire interdisciplinarity group from Amsterdam Young Academy. Of course, we did this together, so the guide was really a labor of love from a team of people. You know who you are, so thanks for doing this. And of course, Spui 25 for hosting us today and working with us on this program. So with that, I'd like to close the official part of today and move to the non-official part. Thank you all.